Controversial attorney Miguna is due in a Kenyan court for a hearing over his fight to remain in the country. How robots are posing a growing threat to jobs in Africa. And a choreographer uses dance to help refugees in Congo deal with trauma. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Kenyan police kept opposition politician Miguna in custody on Wednesday in apparent defiance of a judge's order to bring him to court ahead of a possible release from detention. The court ordered Miguna, the interior minister, and the police chief to appear before it by 2 p.m. Kenyan time. Police detained Miguna on Monday at the main airport in the capital as he returned after court ruled that he should be allowed back into Kenya. He was deported 7 weeks ago after administering the oath of office to opposition leader Raila Odinga as the people's president. Authorities refused to let Miguna into the country, even though he was carrying a copy of a Supreme Court order allowing entry. Miguna has told VOA that he intends to lead a revolutionary movement to eventually replace President Kenyatta and Odinga. Amnesty International has criticized Kenyan authorities' refusal to let lawyer Miguna into the country to appear before the court. For more on the drama playing out in Kenya, Irungo Houghton, Executive Director, Amnesty International Kenya Chapter, joins me live via Skype from Nairobi. Good evening, Irungo.
Good evening, Vincent.
Yes, now, first, you came out very strongly, to condemn the government. What's really going on here? The government is increasingly becoming defiant, disobeying court orders. What's going on in Kenya?
I think the drama that has unfolded on our television screens is really the hallmark of a Hollywood tragicomedy. If it was not a travesty of justice, I think many of us would really see this as the beginnings of another blockbuster that would be watched on several cinemas. But what's been happening essentially is from February the 2nd, Miguna was arrested. He was then shuttled from police station to police station. He was then bundled out of the country against his will and despite a court order. And in his absence, he received a court order that instructed the government to give him safe passage to return to Kenya, and that he tried to do 2 days ago. And what we've seen is essentially the police arresting him at the airport, holding him in communicado from his lawyers, and refusing, despite a court order today, that he be released to attend the court hearing that will determine his case.
Now, Rongo, Kenya has been priding itself with having a very strong constitution, respect for the courts. What is happening at the moment when we see that the government is actually disregarding any orders from the court? What does it signal?
I think there are a couple of things. One is that the Constitution still remains one of the most progressive constitutions on the continent. But as we probably could say, is in 2010, Kenya was in search of a constitution. I think now the Constitution is in search of a country. What we've seen is a number of court orders completely violated, to the point that this evening, Justice Odunga has actually issued a warrant of arrest for the Cabinet Secretary, the head of police, the head of CID, and a number of other important government officers for simply disregarding the court. They are now being held in contempt of court and have been instructed to appear before the court, not in terms of their representatives, but actually in terms of their personal appearance.
Yes.
And I think we are on a dangerous path in terms of legality. And secondly, also, I think for the other side of things, which is, I think, politically, this is a costly course of action for the government to continue.
Yes. Talk a little bit about the harassment of journalists, in fact, assault.
Well, I think we, as Amnesty, have been very concerned about the shutdown of the media that took place early in the year when 3 major media houses attempted to cover the rally that was called by the NASA opposition movement led by Raila Odinga. And we saw 1 week of shutdown for these 3 major media houses, costing millions and millions of shillings in revenue to these private media houses. And in the last 48 hours, we've seen 3 journalists essentially roughed up, beaten, and their camera equipment destroyed or damaged in the course of their attempt to cover the spectacle at the airport.
Really sad, Irongo. We do appreciate your perspective. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
That was Irongo Hilton, the Executive Director of Amnesty International in Kenya, speaking to us from Nairobi via Skype. Now, staying in Kenya, Kibera slums on the outskirts of Nairobi is home to about 2.5 million people. They live in shacks and are faced with multiple challenges, including unemployment and a lack of access to clean water and sanitation and inadequate health services. One of the greatest challenges is around education. Africa 54's Esther Gidhu brings us the story of Kibera Primary School.
Located in Africa's largest squalid community, a sprawling area of shanty houses and grinding poverty, is the beautiful Kibera Primary School, with thousands of poor children eager to get an education. But an acute shortage of qualified primary school teachers in the country and the large class sizes at the school is overwhelming for both teachers and students. Ruth Adera is the deputy headmistress of the school.
Most of our classes, the list has 80 pupils. But there are those classes that runs to over 90, 100, like in class 7s, class 5s. So you find in with the ministry policy of provision is 50 pupils per teacher. But here we have on a lesser side, a lesser figure, we have 80 pupils per teacher.
Kibera is located inside Lang'ata constituency, where Kenya's opposition leader Raila Odinga served as a member of parliament from 1997 to 2013. But neither education policies nor politics have revamped the lives of millions of residents living there. Over the last year, politics have taken center stage, dividing Kenyans along ethnic lines. Economic experts say the political upheaval has deeply affected Kenya's economy as food imports climbed 58% compared to a year earlier. Adera says the school's population, which stands at more than 2,000, faced many environmental, social and economic hardships.
Most of our parents are not economically empowered. They live below poverty line. Most of them are accessing basic needs is of a great challenge to them. Most of our children come to school empty stomach, meaning some of them do not get something for supper, neither do they get something for breakfast.
Many children from Kibera schools are likely to drop out while fighting an uphill battle as they struggle to learn. There is a shortage of teachers and secondary schools in the area, and most parents lack basic resources to support their children. One such student is Michael Ogola, an orphan whose goal is to become a scientist. At 16, he is still in 7th grade and survives on only one meal a day, a mix of maize and potatoes provided at the school by the World Food Programme.
My career in future, I would like to be a scientist, and I have experienced many challenges at school and with my guardian at home. He could not even sometimes pay for me feeding programs in school that are needed. So the food that I eat in school is the one that I go home and sometimes sleep with them.
Kenyans are hoping the recent handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga will hold and calm the political rhetoric in order to focus on the much-needed revival of the country's economy, as well as other key sectors such as health and education. Esther Gidhu, VOA News, Washington.
To the north of the continent now, Egyptians are voting for a third and final day Wednesday in an election that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is almost certain to win. The only other candidate on the ballot, Mustafa Musa, registered at the last minute, and he supports el-Sisi. Rights groups and opposition leaders say the election is a sham. They are calling for a boycott of the vote, a move government supporters say is tantamount to treason. El-Sisi came to power after leading the 2013 military overthrow of his freely elected Islamist predecessor, Mohamed Morsi, amid mass protests against his divisive year-long rule. Now, to the south of the continent now, Zimbabweans are preparing for the first election in the post-Mugabe era. And 4 months into his presidency, Emmerson Mnangagwa appears to be consolidating his position as leader of the ruling ZANU-PF. The opposition movement for democratic change is preparing to face Mnangagwa at the polls in July. But it's grappling with its own leadership challenges following the death of founding leader Morgan Tsvangirai last month. With new faces on the ballot, what are the implications for the country's political landscape as it heads into election season? For more on that, we're joined by Fidelity Aplanga, a visiting newspaper journalist from Zimbabwe. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent, for having me.
It's been an interesting time in Zimbabwe. Two people who have been like a permanent fixture of the political landscape there are not in the picture anymore. How are things looking like?
Yeah, the situation in Zimbabwe is very interesting. For the first time, we are having new faces on the ballot paper. President Mnangagwa and the new opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, are coming on the elections, which are set to happen in August or July.
Yeah. Now, you've been there. I mean, I really wish to be in Zimbabwe to experience this transitional period. How is the mood in the country? How are people kind of reacting to this new kind of developments?
Well, when former President Robert Mugabe resigned in November last year, there has been some ray of hope that the country was heading for better times, taking into cognizance that the past 18 years, the country has been experiencing some harsh economic situation. And when President Mnangagwa came in, he came with a new mantra: Zimbabwe is open for business. And this has been received by many Zimbabweans as a chance for the country to move forward.
Yeah. In terms of the political affiliation of the citizens who are going to vote, do you get the sense that people are kind of somehow warming up to the ruling party now that Mugabe is no longer the leader of that party?
Yeah, there's a situation there because when President Mnangagwa came in, he chose a cabinet, which most Zimbabweans said it's a dead cabinet. They didn't expect him to appoint the same old faces that were in former President Mugabe's cabinet. So there has been some sort of resistance, and people are saying, well, it seems like it's the old ZANU-PF that has been in power for 38 years now.
Well, they are headed to the elections, of course, with a totally different political reality here. No Mugabe, but no Tsvangirai.
Yes.
What do things look like in terms of the hope for a free and fair election, which was a problem in the past?
Yes, the current president has promised free, credible, and fair elections, and has invited EU, UN, to actually look at the polls. And this actually has been received well by Zimbabweans. Yes, and well, I hope he will stick to his guns, and these blocks will come in and inspect the polls.
But as you said, anything like, if I lose fairly, I will, of course, vacate that seat.
Yes, he has hinted on that, and I hope we Zimbabweans hope that he'll stick to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we look forward, and we hope to see a totally different and progressive Zimbabwe. Fidelity, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Fidelity Aplanga, who's a journalist from Zimbabwe visiting Washington. Now, about 8 million youth in the Democratic Republic of Congo have come of age just in time for a critical national election that's been scheduled for later this year. Viewers Anita Powell talked to young people in Kinshasa about what they think of the election and whether it could help end the country's political crisis.
These bright young Congolese students are used to tests. In a few months, they hope to put their country through one. Kinshasa is an opposition stronghold. Young people have played a visible role in protests in the capital seeking the resignation of President Joseph Kabila and say they want to be a force for change.
President Kabila, if he has to resign, that begins by acknowledging it. He himself, he knows he has already finished his term. He has even gone over.
The poll, originally scheduled for 2016, is now slated for December. The 2-year delay has seen additional voters, like 19-year-old Richard Baku, come of age.
It's
important that we get a new president that is going to serve the people in order to create jobs so we can have a better life.
But the ruling party says it's confident it will corner this important demographic. After all, among the nation's top politicians, Kabila, at 46, is one of the youngest.
It's a
party that empowers youth, and it's a party that has a rather clear vision of the role youth should play in the development of our country.
But some young voters already say they plan to let this vote pass them by.
This election stuff, it doesn't interest me. I find that even when we vote, there's too much cheating and fraud. I'd rather not vote this year.
Better, she says, to keep her head out of politics and in her books. Anita Powell, VOA News, Kinshasa.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Now, coming up, how cheap automation could impact jobs on the continent. Stay with us. But it could soon be cheaper to operate a factory of robots in the United States than employing manual labor in Africa. That's the stark conclusion of a report from the Overseas Development Institute, which warns automation could have a devastating effect on developing economies unless governments invest urgently in digitization and skills training. And Ridgewell has more.
Outsourcing production by using cheap labour in the developing world has underpinned the global economy for decades. But technology could be about to turn that on its head. Research from the Overseas Development Institute focused on the example of furniture manufacturing in Africa.
In the next 15 to 20 years, robots in US are actually going to become much cheaper than Kenyan labor, particularly in the furniture manufacturing industry. So this means that around 2033, American companies will find it much more profitable to reshore production back, which means essentially get all the jobs in production back from the developing countries to the US. And that obviously, can have very significantly negative effects for jobs in Africa.
As robots are getting cheaper, people are getting more expensive.
So the cost of a robot or the cost of a 3D printer, they're declining at similar levels, around 6% annually. So, that's a significant decline, whereas wages in developing countries are rising.
By 2038, the ODI predicts it will be cheaper to make clothing in the United States using robots than to import it from Ethiopia. Last year, sports giant Adidas invested in automated plants in Germany and the United States, including using 3D printers to make these sneakers.
We've seen that there are reshoring examples where Adidas shoes have reshored their production back from Vietnam, and that has led to a loss of like 1,000 jobs in Vietnam till now. And that's going to be significantly increased in the future.
Adidas bosses say they do not envisage further large-scale reshoring of jobs. But there is no doubting the challenges posed by automation to manual labour in developing countries. Some are fighting back. Kenyan firm FunKids has invested heavily in computer-aided design and manufacturing of furniture.
Using these technologies, they've been able to achieve impressive growth, and they've also expanded to regional markets like Rwanda and Uganda. So they've utilized this technology and actually made it into something that they can use, to grow. So if done well, digitalization does have immense, opportunities and potential for African countries to capitalize on.
FunKids' CEO says the government needs to match her firm's enthusiasm for technology.
We have machines that sit idle because we don't have skilled
people. There's many people who need jobs. Yes, we agree. But if they have no skill, I'd love to employ you, but you need a skill. Otherwise, you cannot operate our machines. So we are urging all institutions, government, please, let's take this skills gap as a crisis.
That call is echoed by the ODI report authors, who urge African governments to use the current window of opportunity to build industrial capabilities and digital skills before the jobs crunch hits. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, helping refugees heal through dance. We'll be right back.
In Ethiopia, the ruling coalition has elected Abiy Ahmed Ali as leader, paving the way for him to become prime minister. He'll be the first Oromo leader in the 27-year rule of the EPRDF. Columnists from Kenya's Nation newspaper resigned en masse Tuesday, claiming interference and meddling from the government. In Ivory Coast, Mass Mart chairman Kuseni Dlamini says the company is expanding by 20 stores in 5 African nations over 3 years. In Egypt, voting continues for a third and final day on Wednesday in an election that some say President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is virtually certain to win. In South Africa, Australian cricketer Steve Smith has been banned from the sport for 12 months and was escorted out of South Africa for his role in a ball tampering scandal.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. At the Inkem refugee camp in the DRC, residents from the Central African Republic get a chance to break from everyday life to enjoy a dance class. Congolese dancer Fabrice Don de Dieu Bwabula Mutima works with a group of volunteers. The program is funded by the French NGO African Artists for Development in collaboration with the UN Refugee Agency. More than 600 people of all ages, refugees and local Congolese residents attend a variety of courses, including children's dance, contemporary African dance, hip-hop, and traditional dance classes, among others. The aim is to teach refugees how to rebuild their self-confidence and coexist. Next up, this humanoid robot is being trained in a year-long pilot program alongside a maths teaching robot at a primary school in Finland. The robot is able to understand and speak 23 languages and is equipped with software that makes it understand students' requirements and help it behave in a way that encourages learning. It communicates in Finnish or English, recognizing the pupils' skills levels and automatically adjusting the questions accordingly, giving feedback to the teacher about possible problems. Some of the human teachers who have worked with the technology see it as one of the many educational tools to be used in engaging children with learning. Well, and finally, Nestle is launching a lower sugar milk bar made with a new version of the sweetener, and it could help ease the $185 billion confectionery industry's growing public health headache. Milk bar, while some will be on shelves in Britain and Ireland in coming weeks. The new bars have 30% less sugar than a typical chocolate bar because of Nestle's new ingredient, sugar that has been physically altered to be lighter and dissolve faster. But they have only 3% fewer calories due to extra natural ingredients. The new sugar partly addresses a tough challenge, how to make junk food healthy but keep it tasty. And that's what is trending today.
But it could be.
Now, alongside Spider-Man, the Hulk, Captain America, Black Widow, and the other superheroes of the Marvel Universe is Ms. Marvel. She is a young, shape-shifting crusader for today's diverse American society. Ariadne Budianto has more on the first Muslim superhero to have her own dedicated series.
She may be a newbie in the world of Marvel superheroes, but since she burst onto the comic book scene in February of 2014, Ms. Marvel has become a cultural phenomenon.
I love this comic because it is diverse and it shows, you know, a side of America that I think comics don't always show.
She's only not dealing with the school side of things, like the culture clashes, like her parents are trying to be traditional, and I guess that's a bit cliche, but she's really struggling with it because she wants to maintain her Muslim identity.
That's right. Miss Marvel, a Pakistani-American teenager named Kamala Khan from Jersey City, is Muslim. So is her creator, G. Willow Wilson.
She faces a lot of the same challenges that any teenager faces about family, school, peer pressure, what she wants to do with her life. So the real goal was to make the book feel real. How can any reader from any background see themselves in this Muslim girl in the Marvel Universe?
Comic store owner and Orthodox Jew Menachem Lukens welcomed Miss Marvel fans to meet the author at his Huntington, New York store. He says he relates to Kamala.
There's the scene where Kamala goes to the mosque and she's talking about the responsibility you have towards people, sort of vaguely implying she might be a superhero, but she doesn't want to tell the imam that she's this. And I would have those hypothetical conversations with rabbis in my head. Could I be allowed on the Sabbath to break Sabbath laws, to use my superpower? Like, these are things that I thought of. So Ms. Marvel connected with me immensely.
The point of a superhero is to be a symbol for the culture at that time.
Kamala Khan's hometown of Jersey City, New Jersey, is one of the world's most diverse cities. Her fictional school is based on the real McNair Academic High School there.
All the places that Kamala has been, we get to see that. It's pretty awesome, you know, that they base a superhero off our school. Yeah, and I think that the comic book represents the diversity that we have in our school.
For many people, this character is their only exposure to Jersey City, only exposure to Islam, to depictions of Muslim people that defies the traditional Hollywood idea of, you know, Islamophobic representation. So it's just interesting to see, especially in this political climate, how this character has really become such a symbol.
In 2015, the first Miss Marvel graphic novel won the Hugo Award, the highest prize in fantasy and science fiction literature for the best graphic story. Ariadna Budianto, VOA News, Huntington, New York.
Well, that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Zimbra Corn is going to be a company that's built in Africa, for Africa, and scaled in Africa.